At my son's wedding, my sister told my son's CEO I was an unemployed loser. I just smiled. Her boss looked at her and said, "You're fired." Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Carol. 6 months ago, if you'd asked me who I was, I would have given you my job title before my name. That's the honest truth. For over 2 decades, I had poured every ounce of myself into a career that, in the end, had defined me. I was Carol Irwin, Senior Director of Marketing, the woman with the corner office on the 45th floor overlooking the entire glittering expanse of the Manhattan skyline. The woman who managed a team of 20, who juggled a $50 million annual budget like it was pocket change, who lived on coffee and deadlines and the intoxicating thrill of a successful campaign launch. My sister Brenda called what I did next career suicide. I'm sure my former colleagues, when they gathered for happy hour without me, whispered about burnout. They probably nodded knowingly and said, "Carol finally cracked under the pressure." We all saw it coming. But they didn't see anything. You can't understand a choice like mine from the outside. You can't understand it until you've sat in a sterile, beige-colored room, holding your mother's hand, and heard a doctor in a white coat use words like stage 4 and palliative. When a man with a medical degree tells you the woman who gave you life has maybe 3 months left to live, job titles and quarterly reports and stock options suddenly seem like the most absurd, meaningless things in the world. What I didn't expect, what I could never have prepared for in a million years of boardroom negotiations, was how my own sister would take my deepest pain and try to turn it into her public spectacle. How she would use my sacrifice to humiliate me in front of 200 wedding guests, a group that included my own son's CEO. What she didn't know, in her moment of cruel triumph, was that her boss and the man whose fledgling company I had saved from bankruptcy years ago were the very same person. And he had spent the last 2 months trying to hire me back into the world I had left behind. The moment she leaned into that microphone, her voice dripping with the fakest pity you've ever heard as she painted me as a jobless loser, thinking she was impressing the most powerful man in the room, she had no idea she was actually talking to the one person there who knew exactly who I was, and exactly what I was worth. If you're watching this, please settle in. Maybe grab a cup of coffee. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because I'd love to know who I'm sharing this with. What happened next didn't just change my career. It changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, success, and the incredibly high price of keeping quiet. Let me take you back to the beginning of the end, or maybe, the end of the beginning. 6 months before my son Keith's wedding. It was a Tuesday. I remember I was in the middle of a high-stakes video conference with our partners in Seoul. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. Millions of dollars were on the line, hinging on the next words out of my mouth. I had my game face on, calm, confident, unshakable. On my shelf, 3 industry awards gleamed under the recessed lighting. My leather chair felt like a throne. This was my kingdom, and I was its queen. In the middle of my presentation, my phone, which was set to silent, lit up on the polished mahogany table. The oncologist's name flashed on the screen. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through the armor of my corporate persona. I excused myself as smoothly as I could, claiming a need for some water, and stepped into the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I took the call. The doctor's voice was clinical, detached, as he delivered the news. The tests came back, Ms. Irwin. It's metastasized. Stage 4. He used words like prognosis and aggressive. I asked questions, my voice sounding strangely high and thin to my own ears. How long? I finally whispered, leaning against the cool glass wall, the New York City skyline a blurry watercolor behind me. We're looking at months, not years, he said. I'm so sorry. I don't remember ending the call or walking back into the boardroom. The rest of the day was a fog. I heard words, I nodded, I probably even smiled, but I wasn't there. My mind was in my mother's quiet suburban house, with her garden and her worn-out armchair. My mother. My rock. The woman who had held me together through a painful divorce years ago, who had babysat Keith so I could work late, who had taught me that strength wasn't about never falling, but about how you got back up. That afternoon, I typed my resignation letter. My boss, a good man named Arthur, was floored. "Carol, you can't be serious," he said, his face etched with concern. "Take a leave of absence. A sabbatical. We'll hold your job. Name your terms." "It's not a negotiation, Arthur," I told him, my voice surprisingly steady. "This is something I have to do." Packing up my desk felt like curating a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The photo of Keith at his high school graduation, the silly mug a colleague had given me, the stack of glowing performance reviews. Relics. As I did my final walk through the office, a few colleagues offered awkward hugs and well wishes. I could feel their pity and their curiosity. I was a story they would tell for weeks. The drive to my mom's house that evening was the quietest I've ever experienced. I turned off the radio. The hum of the engine was the only sound. I was driving away from my life, from my identity, from the salary that paid my mortgage and had put my son through college without a single loan. And I was driving towards something unknown and terrifying. That first night, as I helped my mom get ready for bed, fumbling with her medications and her oxygen machine, she looked at me, her eyes clouded with confusion but full of love. "You're a good daughter, Carol," she whispered. In that moment, in the sterile quiet of her bedroom, I knew I had lost my career, but I had found my purpose again. My younger sister Brenda's reaction was, in hindsight, exactly what I should have expected. Our relationship had been a complicated dance of one-sided rivalry for years. She was the pretty one, I was the smart one. She was the popular one, I was the ambitious one. It was a narrative she had created, a competition I had no interest in winning. She arrived at Mom's house 2 days after I moved in, not with a casserole or an offer to help, but with an air of morbid curiosity. The sound of her new Lexus pulling into the driveway was as loud and intrusive as her personality. She swept into the house without knocking, her expensive perfume instantly overwhelming the familiar scent of Mom's lavender potpourri. "Wow," she said, looking around the living room where I had set up a temporary workspace on a card table. "It's even more depressing than I imagined." "It's good to see you too, Brenda," I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was researching hospice care providers. She ignored my sarcasm and perched on the arm of the sofa, careful not to wrinkle her designer suit. "So, this is it, huh? You're just done?" she asked, waving a hand vaguely around the room. In her other hand, she clutched her brand-new, eye-wateringly expensive Hermes bag, a recent gift to herself, as she'd loudly announced on Facebook, to celebrate her promotion to HR director at a tech company called TechVision. I finally closed my laptop. "I'm not done, Brenda. I'm here for Mom." She scoffed, a little puff of air that was pure condescension. "All that work, Carol. All those years you spent climbing the ladder, all the sacrifices. And you're just throwing it all away to play nurse." The words were like a physical slap, but I was too tired, too raw, to fight back. I had spent the morning on the phone with insurance companies, a soul-crushing experience that had left me drained. "It's called taking care of our family, Brenda," I said, my voice tight with a mixture of grief and anger. "It's called giving up," she shot back, standing up and smoothing down her skirt. She looked at me, a strange mix of pity and triumph in her eyes. "But I guess not everyone can handle the pressure of corporate life long-term." "Don't worry," she added, her voice dripping with fake concern, "I'm sure you'll figure something out. Maybe you can get a part-time job or something once, you know." After she left, leaving a cloud of perfume and resentment in her wake, I sat there for a long time. I thought about our childhood. I remembered the time I won the school science fair, and Brenda accidentally spilled juice all over my project right before the awards ceremony. I remembered the way she'd always belittled my boyfriends in high school, and the way she'd made a toast at my wedding that was more about her than about me and my now ex-husband. It had never been a competition to me. To her, it was everything. And now, in her eyes, my tragic situation was her ultimate victory. Brenda's cruelty wasn't a one-time event, it was the beginning of a calculated campaign. Her visits to Mom's house became a bizarre, performative ritual. She'd stop by for precisely 15 minutes, usually during her lunch break. She'd spend 5 minutes complaining about her workload, 5 minutes taking a carefully staged selfie with Mom for her Instagram stories, and 5 minutes telling me all the reasons my decision to quit was a huge mistake. The selfies were the worst. She'd fluff Mom's pillows, gently brush a strand of hair from her forehead, and adopt a somber, loving expression for the camera. The caption would always be something like, "Making time for what matters most." #family first, or "so blessed to have this strong woman in my life." #cherish every moment. Then, her phone would buzz with a work email, and she'd dash out the door, calling back, "Gotta run. Big meeting with the VPs." Online, her campaign was more subtle, but just as vicious. Her Facebook and LinkedIn feeds became a masterclass in passive aggression. She'd post about her latest career triumph, a successful project, a glowing review from her boss, and pair it with a motivational quote that was clearly a jab at me. The future is built by those who show up. Don't let setbacks define you. Let them fuel you. #girlboss, #never settle. The poison started to seep into our extended family. It began at Easter dinner. I was helping clear the plates when Brenda announced to the table, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Isn't it wonderful that Carol has so much free time now? She's taking a much-needed little break from the real world." She patted my shoulder with that condescending little tap of hers. Some people just aren't built for the long haul, you know? Later that evening, my Uncle Robert, who had always come to me for advice on his small hardware business, pulled Brenda aside to ask for her opinion on a new inventory system. He didn't even look at me. My Aunt Patricia, bless her heart, cornered me in the kitchen while I was washing dishes. She slipped me a folded page torn from the classifieds section of the newspaper. "It's a receptionist position, honey," she whispered, as if she were passing me state secrets. "Just in case. The benefits are supposed to be quite good." I just smiled, thanked her, and folded the clipping into my pocket. I went to the bathroom and stood there for a moment, gripping the edges of the sink, my knuckles white. I splashed cold water on my face. I wasn't a receptionist. I was a marketing executive who had managed $50 million budgets. But in their eyes, thanks to my sister, I was just a cautionary tale. A woman who had flown too close to the sun and gotten burned. I was becoming invisible, erased one condescending comment and one pitying glance at a time. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind of last-minute preparations and rising tension. One evening, my son Keith stopped by after work. He had that worried line between his eyebrows that I knew so well. He found me in the living room, looking through old photo albums with Mom, trying to spark a memory. He kissed Mom's cheek and then sat on the floor beside my chair, his presence a warm, solid comfort. We sat in silence for a while, just flipping through the worn pages. Finally, after Mom had dozed off in her chair, he spoke, his voice low. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "It's about Aunt Brenda." I sighed, closing the photo album. "What has she done now, sweetie?" "She's been talking about you at the office," he said, looking at the floor. It was a huge company, TechVision Corporation, and he had been so proud to land a job there as a software engineer right out of college. The fact that his aunt was a senior HR director there had at first seemed like a fun coincidence. Now, it was a nightmare. "She doesn't know we work in the same building, she's in a different tower," he clarified. "But I have friends in her department. They told me. Mom, she's telling people you had a complete nervous breakdown. That the company was going to fire you, so you quit first. She's making it sound like you lost your mind." A hot flash of anger crawled up my neck. It was one thing to poison our family against me. It was another thing entirely to spread these lies at my son's workplace. This could affect his reputation, his future. It's not right, Keith said, his voice thick with anger. You sacrificed everything for Grandma. You gave up a salary that paid for my entire college fund, a career you loved. What she's doing it's evil. I reached out and squeezed his hand. Let her talk, Keith. It's not worth the fight. But it is, he insisted, finally looking at me. And there's something else. My new boss is coming to the wedding. His name is Walter Vance. The name landed in the quiet room like a stone. Walter Vance. I hadn't said his name out loud in 5 years. Keith, oblivious to the history that name held for me, continued. He's the CEO. He was asking about my family, and when I mentioned your background in marketing, his ears perked up. He seemed really interested. He specifically asked about the mother of the groom. I think he might have heard of you. I managed a weak smile, my mind racing. Heard of me? I had saved his entire company. That's nice, honey, I said, trying to sound casual. But a new feeling was taking root in my heart, pushing through the grief and exhaustion. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. It was determination. Brenda thought she had erased me. She was about to find out that some things can't be erased. They just go dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. The morning of Keith's wedding dawned bright and clear. I stood in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd dreamed of my future, and now it felt like a haven from a world that had become complicated and cruel. I was holding Mom's pearl necklace, a single strand of creamy, iridescent orbs that felt cool and heavy in my hand. Mom was having a good day, one of those rare, precious gifts of clarity. She was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, a patch of sunlight warming her face. She looked frail, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. You look beautiful, sweetheart, she said, her voice a soft rasp, but stronger than it had been in weeks. She watched me as I fumbled with the clasp of the necklace. Don't you let Brenda get to you today. You hear me? I met her gaze in the mirror. I'll try, Mom. Don't try. Do, she insisted. She's just insecure, you know. Always has been. She's like a small dog that barks at a big one to make itself feel bigger. Her noise doesn't change the fact that you're the Great Dane in the room. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine laugh that felt good. A Great Dane? Thanks, Mom. You know what I mean, she said, her expression serious again. As I fastened the pearls, a wave of anxiety washed over me. I thought about the 200 people who would be at that wedding. Former clients. Industry leaders. Keith had proudly invited 3 CEOs from my old contact list. They would all be there, mingling, talking. And Brenda would be there, whispering her poisonous version of my story into every willing ear. Carol Irwin couldn't hack it. Burned out. Gave up. It wasn't just my reputation I was worried about. It was Keith. Office politics were brutal. The last thing he needed as he started his career was his colleagues and superiors thinking his mother was unstable. My phone buzzed. For some reason, I looked at it. A notification from LinkedIn, an app one hadn't opened in months. See who's viewed your profile. On a whim, I tapped it. My old profile, a ghost of my former life, loaded onto the screen. And there, in the recent views, were several names from TechVision. And one more thing I hadn't noticed before. Someone had downloaded my portfolio of work just 3 days ago. It was a feature I didn't even know LinkedIn had. Strange. Carol. Mom's voice pulled me from my phone. Whatever happens today, I want you to remember what I always taught you about quiet strength. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one they never see coming. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, the skin as soft and thin as paper. I promise, I said. I knew she was too weak to attend, but I would be her eyes and ears. I would stand tall, I would smile bright, and I would remember that my worth wasn't printed on a business card. It was forged in the choices I made when no one was watching. The 40-minute drive to the wedding venue felt like a slow crawl toward a reckoning. The place was a restored Gilded Age mansion on Long Island, the kind of place with sprawling, manicured lawns and fountains that gurgled with obscene wealth. It was Emily's parents' choice, a world away from my quiet life at Mom's house. As I drove, I played out the scenarios in my head. Confront Brenda in the ladies' room? Ignore her completely? Each option felt like a loss. I handed my keys to the valet and walked inside. The air was buzzing with the happy chatter of the cocktail hour. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. And then I saw him. Walter Vance. He stood near the grand, mahogany bar, holding a glass of what looked like scotch. He was older now, with touches of gray at his temples, but he had the same intense, analytical gaze I remembered. He surveyed the room not like a guest, but like a general surveying a battlefield. A jolt of memory, sharp and vivid, went through me. 5 years ago. Walter wasn't the CEO of a corporate giant then. He was the VP of operations at a scrappy tech startup called Innovatech, and they were hemorrhaging money. Their brand was a joke, their marketing a disaster. They had hired me as a consultant, a last-ditch effort before they closed their doors for good. I remembered the late nights, the brainstorming sessions fueled by stale coffee and a shared sense of desperation. I remembered the moment, in a drab conference room at 2 a.m., when we finally cracked it, the breakthrough strategy that would redefine their brand. I rebuilt their entire marketing department from the ashes. I worked tirelessly for 6 months. The result? Their revenue exploded. A year later, TechVision acquired them for $200 million. That acquisition made Walter Vance a star, and he eventually climbed the ladder to become CEO of the entire corporation. It was one of the most challenging and rewarding projects of my entire career. He caught my eye from across the room. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't the polite, vague smile of a stranger recognizing the groom's mother. It was a smile of recognition, of a shared history. It was the knowing look of someone who held a winning hand they hadn't yet played. Before I could even take a step, Brenda was at my elbow, her manicured nails digging into my arm. "There you are," she hissed, her voice a sickeningly sweet whisper that didn't match the steel grip of her hand. "Come on. There are people you should meet. Keith's colleagues are dying to meet his family." She was practically dragging me, steering me toward a group of young, ambitious professionals, their eyes bright with the hunger of networking. I knew that look. I used to wear it myself. "Everyone, this is Keith's mother," Brenda announced, her voice booming with false cheer. Her hand remained on my arm, a gesture meant to look affectionate but felt like a restraint. "This is Carol. She used to be in marketing, but she's taking some time off now." That little pause, that tiny emphasis on used to be, it was perfectly crafted to sow seeds of doubt. A bright-eyed young woman with a TechVision name badge clipped to her purse smiled warmly at me. "Oh, how wonderful. Which company did you work for?" Her name was Jennifer. Before I could open my mouth, Brenda jumped in, her voice as smooth as oil. "Oh, she was with a few different firms over the years," she said dismissively. "But now she's between opportunities. You know how it is," she continued, turning to the group with a conspiratorial air. "Sometimes the corporate world just gets to be too intense. You have to know when to step back." I kept a pleasant, neutral expression on my face, a mask I had perfected through years of negotiating tough deals. Inside, my stomach was churning. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Walter Vance had drifted closer. He was now just a few feet away, pretending to study a large floral arrangement, but his posture was angled toward us. He was listening. My clutch vibrated. I glanced down discreetly. It was a LinkedIn message, from an account with no name, just initials. WV. My heart did a little flip. The message was simple: check your email. My fingers trembled slightly as I unlocked my phone and opened my email app. It took a second to find it, buried under a week's worth of spam and newsletters. The subject line was stark: offer of employment, SVP Marketing Strategy, TechVision Corporation. It was from Walter Vance's executive assistant. I had only skimmed it last week before sending a polite no, thank you. Now, I read the details. A base salary of $300,000. A signing bonus. Stock options that would be worth a fortune. A complete benefits package. It was a king's ransom. I had replied explaining that my family situation required my full attention, that I was not on the market. Walter himself had replied within the hour. A short, gracious message: family comes first, Carol. I respect that completely. The offer stands whenever you're ready. People with your talent are a rare find. Carol? Jennifer asked what you're doing with all your free time these days. Brenda's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, yanking me back into her little drama. I looked up, meeting the curious gazes of the young professionals. Then my eyes flickered past them, locking with Walter Vance's for a brief, electric moment. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. I'm in transition, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm focusing on what matters most. Brenda let out a laugh that tinkled like breaking glass. It was a sound I had come to despise. That's a very diplomatic way of saying you're unemployed. And that's when it hit me with the force of a physical blow. My sister, the senior HR director of TechVision, a woman who prided herself on being politically savvy and well-connected, had absolutely no idea that her own company's CEO was standing 10 feet away, listening to every single, venomous word. The small group around us had somehow grown larger, like moths drawn to the flickering flame of a drama. Brenda was in her element now, the star of her own show, with me as the tragic supporting character. "This is my sister," she would say to each newcomer, her hand still clamped on my shoulder. She used to be quite successful, actually. A real shark in her day. But you know how it is. Some people peak early. I saw Keith at the edge of the crowd, his face a thundercloud. His beautiful bride Emily, stunning in her white gown, stood beside him, her hand on his arm. She was whispering to him, trying to calm him down, but his jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping. He looked ready to explode. An older gentleman, a man I recognized as the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, stepped closer. "What kind of marketing?" he asked me, his expression genuinely curious. "Oh, the usual," Brenda chirped before I could speak, waving a dismissive hand as if shooing away a fly. "Nothing too impressive." She managed some campaigns, pushed some papers around. Now she's, what did you call it, Carol? Exploring options? She laughed again, that grating, tinkling sound that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. That's corporate speak for unemployed and sitting on the couch watching daytime TV. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people mumbled excuses and peeled away, but more leaned in, their eyes wide. I saw one young man holding his phone up, discreetly recording. "Perfect. I mean, look at me," Brenda continued, puffing up her chest and smoothing down the front of her designer dress. "I've been promoted 3 times in 2 years. Just last month, our CEO, the brilliant Walter Vance, personally selected me for a special project on corporate leadership. He said I remind him of a young version of himself." Behind her, I saw Walter's eyebrows arch in what I could only describe as amused disbelief. "But not everyone can handle that kind of pressure," Brenda said, finally turning her full attention back to me, her voice dripping with condescending pity. When Carol resigned for personal reasons, I knew it was over for her. Who is going to hire someone who walked away from a 20-year career? It's career suicide. A massive red flag. "Brenda?" Keith's voice was low and dangerous. "What, honey?" "I'm just being honest," she said, not even looking at him. "Your mom knows I love her, but facts are facts. She's unemployable now." She leaned in closer to me, her eyes glittering with a triumphant, cruel light. Tell them, Carol. Go on. Tell them how you haven't updated your LinkedIn in 6 months. Tell them how you let calls from recruiters go straight to voicemail. Tell them how you've just completely given up. She took a step back, addressing her rapt audience. The truth is, she announced, her voice ringing with the dramatic finality of a judge delivering a sentence, my sister is a cautionary tale. She's a story about women who can't maintain a work-life balance. She cracked under the pressure, pure and simple. And now, at her own son's wedding, she's just another unemployed, middle-aged woman trying to seem relevant. It was at that moment that Walter Vance began to walk slowly, deliberately, toward us. Brenda, completely lost in her own monologue, didn't see him coming. She was on her final, triumphant lap, delivering the killing blow. Unlike some people, she said, her eyes sweeping over me with a final, dismissive glare, I have never let family obligations interfere with my career. That's why our CEO, Walter Vance, personally mentors me. He says I remind him of himself at my age, focused, driven, not distracted by trivial things like taking care of dying parents. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the crowd. Even for Brenda, this was a new, shocking low. And then, a calm, low voice cut through the toxic air. It was a voice accustomed to commanding boardrooms and silencing arguments. Ms. Morrison? It was Walter Vance. He had stopped directly behind her. Brenda spun around, her face a comical kaleidoscope of emotions. First, pure surprise. Then, absolute, fawning delight. And finally, a dawning, sickening confusion as she registered the arctic chill in his eyes and the grim set of his jaw. She finally realized he must have heard everything. Mr. Vance. Sir. I didn't know you were here. This is perfect, she gushed, reaching out to shake his hand. He let her, his own hand remaining limp and cool. I was just telling everyone about you. This is my sister, Carol. The one I mentioned, the unemployed one. Walter's smile was a thin, dangerous line. Yes, he said, his voice dangerously smooth. I heard your introduction. It was very thorough. Brenda, somehow, still missed the warning signs. She beamed, thinking this was her moment to shine. I know you value honesty and transparency, sir. I felt it was important that everyone understood the real situation, not some sugar-coated version. Oh, I absolutely value honesty, Walter said, his gaze unwavering and intense. In fact, before we continue this conversation, I feel I should be transparent about something as well. I've been trying to reach your sister for weeks. Brenda's smile flickered, a look of confusion clouding her face. Reach her? But, why would you? Because last month, Walter announced, his voice raising just enough to carry clearly to everyone in the stunned, silent circle, I offered her the position of Senior Vice President of Marketing Strategy at TechVision. With a base salary of $300,000, plus bonuses. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. The air crackled with the sudden, shocking silence. It felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Brenda's mouth opened and then closed. She looked like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible, she finally stammered, her face turning a sickly shade of pale. That can't be right. She's unemployed. She quit her job. She's been out of work for 6 months. She left her position to care for her terminally ill mother, Walter corrected, and this time his tone was as sharp and cold as shattered glass. There is a significant, profound difference, Ms. Morrison, between giving up and choosing what truly matters most. Walter Vance didn't raise his voice, but every single word he spoke landed with the force and precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He wasn't just talking to Brenda anymore, he turned slightly, addressing the entire, growing crowd that had encircled us. For those of you who don't know, he began, his voice calm but radiating authority, 5 years ago, Carol Irwin here saved my previous company from going into bankruptcy. She took a marketing department that was a certified disaster and single-handedly turned it into a profit-generating machine that delivered a 300% ROI, consistently, for 5 years straight. She is, without exaggeration, a legend in our industry. Her campaigns, her strategies, are still being taught as case studies in business schools across the country. Brenda's face had gone from pale to ashen. She looked like she might be sick. But she's not working now because, she sputtered, desperately trying to salvage her narrative. She's not working now because she has declined multiple, lucrative offers, including my own. Walter cut in, his patience clearly gone. In the last week alone, she turned down senior executive positions from Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, and yes, my company, TechVision. All because she is prioritizing her mother's end-of-life care. He held up his phone, the screen glowing. For anyone who doubts it, I have the emails right here. The crowd was dead silent now. I could see at least a half-dozen phones pointed our way, their red recording lights glowing. So, you can imagine my surprise, Walter continued, his eyes locking onto Brenda like a predator, when my own senior HR director, a person who is supposed to champion our company's values, stands here in public calling her own sister unemployable and a failure. Mr. Vance, I didn't know, Brenda whispered, her voice a pathetic squeak. Her hands were shaking. You were just what, Ms. Morrison? Violating our company's code of conduct regarding professional behavior and basic human respect, he finished for her. He pulled up his phone again, scrolling with his thumb. And I find this interesting. Your Facebook post from last Tuesday. The caption reads, "Some people choose success, others choose excuses. So grateful to work for a CEO who values ambition over emotion. #TouchVision proud." When your cousin commented, asking if you were talking about your sister, you replied with a single laughing emoji. The wedding coordinator, a harried-looking woman with a headset, appeared at the edge of the circle. "Is everything all right here?" she asked nervously. "Just fine," Walter said smoothly, not taking his eyes off Brenda. "Actually, could you bring me a microphone? I'd like to propose a toast." A moment later, he held the mic. The brief squeal of feedback silenced the entire ballroom. The string quartet trailed off. Every eye in the room was on us. He gave a lovely, heartfelt toast to Keith and Emily. And then, he turned to me. "I also want to take a moment to address something I just witnessed," he said, his voice booming through the speakers. "Something that speaks to values, to family, and to what real success looks like. 6 months ago, Carol Irwin walked away from one of the most successful marketing careers in our industry. Not because she failed, not because she couldn't handle the pressure, but because her mother needed her." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Her own sister just announced to 30 people that Carol is unemployable. The truth is, I offered her $300,000 a year to join my company last week, and she declined. Because she is a woman of integrity. She is a woman who chose love over money, and family over fame. He then turned, his eyes like chips of ice, to my sister. "Ms. Morrison, you have spent this evening telling everyone your sister is, and I quote, an unemployed loser who couldn't handle corporate life. You did this while representing yourself as a senior leader at TechVision. You invoked my name, claiming I personally mentor you, which, for the record, is a complete fabrication." Brenda made a small, wounded, choking sound. "So let me be crystal clear," Walter said, his voice carrying the cold, final weight of judgment. Publicly humiliating a family member, especially one who is caring for a dying parent, shows a staggering lack of empathy and a profound lack of character. It is behavior that is utterly incompatible with a leadership role in human resources. I have here, on my phone, a termination letter. It is effective immediately. Security will escort you to clean out your desk on Monday morning. If you're still here with me, would you do me a huge favor and hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below? That way, I'll know you're on this journey with me. It means the world to me and gives me so much encouragement. So please, comment with a 1, and let me tell you what happened next. The silence that followed Walter's final, brutal announcement was absolute. For a heartbeat, 200 people seemed to hold their breath at once. Then, the whispers started, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Brenda stood frozen, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks, her expensive designer dress suddenly looking like a cheap costume that no longer fit. Her carefully constructed world had just been demolished in front of everyone she had tried to impress. "Aunt Brenda, I think you should leave," Keith said again, his voice calm but firm, a clear dismissal. She finally broke her frozen state, but not with remorse. With rage. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You planned this," she shrieked, her voice hysterical. "You knew he'd be here. You set me up." I finally spoke, my voice quiet but carrying with the same calm authority I had used in 1,000 boardrooms. "I didn't plan anything, Brenda," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "I didn't have to. You wrote this ending for yourself, one cruel word at a time." As 2 discreet security guards from the venue quietly appeared and began to escort my sobbing sister out of the ballroom, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The crowd, which had been a circle of spectators, suddenly surged forward. But they weren't moving to get a better look at Brenda's downfall. They were moving toward me. The Fortune 500 executive from earlier was the first to reach me, his hand outstretched. "Carol Irwin. From the Samsung Partnership. My God, I've been trying to poach you for years. We need a new head for our global marketing division. The job is yours if you want it." Before I could even respond, another man was pushing a business card into my hand. "Jacobson Tech. We're launching in Asia, we need strategic leadership. Name your price, Carol. Seriously, whatever you want." It was overwhelming, a dizzying, intoxicating reversal of fortune. Job offers, business cards, words of praise and admiration. Walter stood beside me, watching with a small, satisfied smile. He raised a hand, and the enthusiastic crowd quieted slightly. "As I said, I've already made Ms. Irwin an offer. 300,000 base, full benefits, and unlimited family leave to care for her mother." "I'll double it," a voice called out from the back. Walter just chuckled and looked at me, a knowing glint in his eye. "Though something tells me," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "that you have bigger plans than working for any of us." He was right. In that moment, with the adrenaline coursing through my veins and a newfound clarity sharp in my mind, an idea bloomed, fully formed. I had spent my entire life building other people's empires, playing by other people's rules. No more. I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mr. Vance. I've been thinking," I said, my voice ringing with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. "After 20 years of building other people's companies, maybe it's time I built my own." The crowd leaned in, a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. "I'm launching Irwin Strategic Consulting next month," I announced. "A boutique firm. A selective clientele. Focused on companies that value both performance and people." Walter's smile widened into something genuine and warm. "Then TechVision would like to be your first client," he declared loudly, for all to hear. "A $2 million initial contract, renewable annually. We need someone to overhaul our entire marketing strategy, and especially," he added with a pointed, meaningful emphasis, "our HR and internal communications. It seems we have some toxic culture issues that need to be addressed immediately." The irony was delicious, and it was lost on no one. In the span of a single wedding toast, I had gone from being an unemployed loser to an 8-figure business owner, about to be paid millions of dollars to fix the very mess my sister had helped create. The rest of the wedding reception felt like a dream. The atmosphere had completely transformed. It wasn't just a wedding anymore, it was a celebration of vindication. Keith and Emily were beaming, thrilled that their special day had included this moment of justice for me. The most surreal part happened at the head table. Emily's father, a sharp corporate lawyer, had overheard everything. He came over, a grin on his face. Carol, let's not let these offers evaporate, he said. He pulled up a standard consulting agreement on his tablet. While people were dancing and eating cake, I was sitting at the head table, negotiating terms. Walter Vance's assistant, who lived nearby, had driven over with official TechVision letterhead. By the time the cake was cut, Irwin Strategic Consulting had its first 3 clients and $6 million in guaranteed revenue, with initial agreements signed right there on my son's wedding day. But the success, the money, the new company, that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came in the months that followed. I set up my company exactly the way I wanted. We were a fully remote team. I sought out and hired the most brilliant professionals I knew, mostly working mothers, caregivers, and talented people who, like me, had been pushed out of the rigid, unforgiving structure of traditional corporate life. We delivered exceptional, world-class work for our clients. And we did it between school pickups and doctor's appointments. We proved that you didn't have to sacrifice your family for a successful career. The revenue from that first TechVision contract allowed me to provide the absolute best end-of-life care for my mother. I hired round-the-clock private hospice nurses, the best in the state. Her final months were spent in comfort, free from pain, surrounded by love, in her own home. I was there for her bad days and her good ones. I was there to hold her hand and read her favorite poems. I was there when she took her last, peaceful breath. And I was there because I could be. Because no contract, no meeting, no amount of money in the world was worth missing that moment. That was the real profit. That was the real bottom line. A few weeks after Mom's funeral, I received an email from Brenda. It was short and humbled. I know you won't respond, it began, but I need to say this. I was wrong. I was jealous, insecure, and cruel. Losing everything taught me what you already knew. Success without family is just emptiness with a title. I'm starting over, in an entry-level job at a small firm. Your name came up, and I think you put in a good word for me. Thank you for that grace I didn't deserve. I read the email, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Just a quiet sense of closure. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Some things are broken in a way that can't be fixed. 1 year after that fateful wedding, I was sitting in my new home office, a sun-filled space that overlooked a garden I had planted in my mother's memory. Irwin Strategic Consulting was now valued at $30 million. We had a waiting list of clients that stretched 2 years out. Harvard Business School had published a case study on our founding and our unique business model, calling it a new paradigm for values-based leadership in the 21st century. But the successes that truly mattered to me were smaller and quieter. It was the email I received from Jennifer Liu, the young woman from the wedding, whom I had recommended to Walter to take over Brenda's old department. She had been promoted to interim HR director and had just told me that employee satisfaction and retention at TechVision had jumped 60% after they implemented the new family-first policies our firm had designed. It was the photos my employees sent me on our group chat, pictures of their kids' soccer games, school plays, and family vacations that they no longer had to miss because of a rigid, unforgiving work schedule. It was my son Keith, telling me over dinner one night that he and Emily were expecting their first child, my first grandchild. He looked at me across the table and said, "Mom, I'm so proud to share your last name." Last month, my COO informed me, with a certain ironic amusement, that Brenda, who had worked her way up to a VP position at her new company, had submitted a formal request to hire our firm. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about forgiveness, and I thought about boundaries. Take the meeting, I finally decided. Assign our best team to it. But I won't lead the account. We took them on as a client, not for Brenda, but for the hundreds of employees at her company who deserve to work in a better, more humane environment. My sister had called me a jobless loser. She had called me a failure. She thought she was exposing my weakness to the world. But instead, all she did was reveal my greatest strength. Her cruelty was the catalyst I never knew I needed. It forced me to stop playing by a set of rules that were never written for women like us, women who choose family, women who refuse to apologize for having priorities beyond a profit and loss statement. Every cruel word she uttered became the fuel for my new beginning. Every insult became my inspiration. She thought she was writing my final chapter, but she only ended up becoming a footnote in the story of my success. So, that's my story. It's been quite a journey, and I want to thank you for walking it with me today. Life can throw some incredible challenges our way, and sometimes the people who are supposed to be in our corner are the ones who hit us the hardest. Have you ever had a family member underestimate you or try to tear you down? How did you handle it? I would genuinely love to hear your stories and your wisdom in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them helps all of us feel a little less alone in our struggles. Please, take care of yourselves, and never, ever forget what you are truly worth. And so, this story leaves us with a powerful reminder: our worth is not defined by the titles we hold, the salaries we earn, or the opinions of others. True strength lies in the choices we make when faced with adversity, in the values we uphold when the world tries to diminish us. Carol's journey teaches us that self-worth comes from within, and when we align our actions with our principles, the rewards, both tangible and intangible, are immeasurable. It also highlights the importance of resilience and grace. Even when faced with betrayal and cruelty, Carol chose to rise above, letting her integrity and quiet strength speak louder than any insult. Her ability to transform pain into purpose is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for growth and reinvention. In the end, those who try to tear us down often become the catalysts for our greatest triumphs. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where someone underestimated you, only for it to fuel your determination? Share your thoughts below or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Let's celebrate the power of perseverance and the beauty of staying true to ourselves.